political thoughts on climate change. Climate change is a challenge that every continent on Earth is facing. Many factors limit the amounts of what can and can't be put into the environment harmfully. As stated in the speech to the United Nations General Assembly, healthy decisions were made during the Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol to reverse and prevent climate change rather than just healing it. Ideas from this were put into place to limit pollution put into the environment in the 80s. Even though global leaders were smart enough back then to put acts into place to protect the ozone and carbon emissions let into the atmosphere, it is still not enough for what is happening today. With ignorance comes persisting problems, and unless there is a change through direct influence by government officials, the Earth will continue onto the dark path of pollution. This led me to my research question: why should global leaders take climate change and its effects on the populace seriously? Firstly, I would like to introduce the thought of what climate change is. Climate change and global warming can sometimes go hand in hand, but mainly they differ from each other. Climate change is a broader term that reflects the fact that carbon pollution does more than just warm our planet. Carbon pollution is also changing rain and snow patterns and increasing the risk of intense storms and droughts, says the Climate Change Project. Global warming applies to the long-term and gradual rise of temperatures, and according to NASA, climate change can cause a range of problems, causing ice caps and glaciers to melt earlier than predicted, plant and animal ranges shifting, trees flowering sooner than expected, and loss of sea ice, accelerated sea level rise, and longer, more intense heat waves. Scientists have predicted global temperatures to rise, but through greenhouse gas emissions, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, which has members and scientists from across the globe, predict a global temperature rise between 2.5 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit over the next 10 years. These effects will vary across the planet, but it can cause harmful and beneficial factors. Climate change and the rise of temperatures is inevitable, but with it brings many negative effects, including changes in precipitation patterns, longer droughts and heat waves, stronger and longer hurricanes, and sea levels are expected to rise up to 4 feet by 2100. With all these concerning matters, many steps need to be put into place to fix this. On the other hand, those who don't believe in climate change state that little to no evidence is shown to be considered beyond a reasonable doubt that climate change is real. A real problem that we are facing today, especially in the eyes of political figures. Climate change is a problem that has been here before humans, but through industrialization, we have caused a process that speeds it up. Scientists figured out ways to combat this, such as reducing emissions and getting political figures to enact laws, but in no way is climate change dismissible. Like the song Blowing in the Wind states, how many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? This can directly correlate to the toxic release of chemicals into the environment. Like the recurring lyrics hint at how many times must we see the effects before learning about the consequences that follow. Countries and governments need to be held accountable to inform the public and their people about problems of climate change and other major issues. Through this process, the rates of disbelief will likely decrease and progress can be made. Consequently, political views on climate change affect the according populace, and this shows through research. Activists say that U.S. President Donald Trump's influence on the summit in Poland was clear and negative. Trump doesn't believe in his own country's scientists and the government, and this has opened the door for many climate change skeptics to come through, says the Washington Post. A study done by Yale University by Anthony Leserowitz et al. Surveyed 1,278 American citizens, 1,067 of them being registered voters, over their view on global warming. They found that most registered voters, 73%, think that climate change is happening, including 95% of liberal Democrats, 88% of moderate conservative Democrats, 68% of liberal moderate Republicans, and only 40% of conservative Republicans. This shows accordance between parties of major political figures in office and their supporting populace. People that fall into the category of conservative Republican also show lowest across the board when being asked if they believe in man-made climate change and asked if they support policies to take positive action reversing the harmful factors of climate change. A rebuttal to this would be that it doesn't show in other countries, but that is actually false. Many other countries don't believe in climate change, including Saudi Arabia and Russia, and countries sitting on the fence like Australia, Germany, Sweden, and Poland. This is especially bad considering that political influences do show correlation between them and their citizens. A formal resolve to this would to only allow a scientific fact to be taught to the public and proper information being stated rather than a person's own beliefs or viewpoints. Lastly, I would like to go over the problem of political leaders pulling or withdrawing policies and agreements. With the recent withdrawal of the United States from the UN Paris Climate Accord in 2018, which regulated the amounts of greenhouse gases allowed into the atmosphere, with Trump's occupation in office, not only did he focus on increasing combustion of fossil fuels as a main source of energy, he didn't mention a plan for use of renewable or green energy. When elected into office, Trump also directly attacked President Barack Obama's climate action plan, which protected the amounts of carbon being let into the atmosphere, preventing deforestation and encouraging the use of alternate fuels other than fossil fuels. Trump also dismantled programs that protected the quality of air and water. This is especially important because of the way that we are heading as a country. Skeptics can claim that few of Trump's enacted policies have actually cared for the environment, but this falls through. Because he may have done something good, but that doesn't cover up the bad. The country needs better supervision on what goes on and who the president appoints and what policies he messes with. When government officials decide to play the role of puppeteer and mess with vital policies that not only deal with the problems facing the country, but the problems facing the world. In conclusion, the effects of climate change are looming on us, and if action isn't taken soon, it will be too late to reverse the damage and effects that are caused due to senseless release of greenhouse gases and carbon emissions. Political figures not only hold the standard to inform the public, but they hold the future of not only a country and its people, but the world in their hands. With the necessary backing of political figure and proper information to the public, we are doomed to fall into a cycle where the summers get hotter faster and the winters get harsher for longer. If things aren't changed within a span of 12 years, scientifically, the Earth is bound to suffer the consequences of pollution.
How did you handle the differing perspectives in order to reach your conclusion?
Can you repeat that question?
How did you handle the differing perspectives in order to reach your conclusion?
I feel like the differing perspectives really enacted like a passion in me to really get my, like the threat of climate change looming on us and my message across to not only the people sitting here, but hopefully people across the nation, and this will lead to a better influence on what is actually said for climate change.
Okay, explain the level of certainty that you have about your conclusion, solution, or recommendation. Your level of certainty.
I feel certain about my conclusion because it uses facts by stating that by a 12-year span, we will almost be facing an irreversible amount of damage from climate change. And I feel like that really hits home for many people and should be taken very seriously.